Here's the unfair part before we even start. You're born with a nervous system that snake venom can barely touch. Most animals spend millions of years of evolution trying to avoid a cobra. You're born already halfway immune to one. That's not a skill you'll earn. That's just the hand you were dealt. Beat. You're born underground, blind, hairless, and about the size of a hot dog, in a den your mother didn't even bother digging herself. She just took over somebody else's burrow, because why put in the effort when there's already a hole available? Your squeaking is pathetic. Nothing about you right now says fearless, but the receptors in your muscles are already wired differently than almost anything else on the savannah, and you don't even know it yet. Mom isn't the nurturing type. She's busy snarling at anything that gets too close to the den, and she's doing it alone because honey badgers don't really do partnerships. No dad around, no pack, just her, and soon, you. For now, life is eating, sleeping, and occasionally gnawing on her tail when she's not paying attention. Simple. Almost normal. That doesn't last. Beat. A few months in, she starts dragging you along on her rounds, and your first real lesson is bees. Not a metaphor, actual bees, an entire hive of them, and she rips it open like it owes her something. They swarm her immediately, stinging her face, her paws, everywhere they can land, and she does not slow down. She's not tough because she's ignoring the pain. She's tough because her skin is nearly 2 inches thick in places, loose enough to twist almost all the way around inside itself, which means when something bites down on her, she can spin around inside her own hide and bite it right back. Bee stings barely register as a rounding error. Eventually, she grunts at you, which in honey badger is basically your turn. You take a swing at the hive and immediately get stung on the nose. You fall over. You scramble back. Mom keeps eating like nothing happened, because to her, nothing did. You'll get stung 100 more times before this stops hurting the way it hurts right now. But it will stop, because your body is already building toward the same tolerance hers has. This is the first unfair advantage stacking up. Pain that would send another animal running is for you just background noise. Beat. By 6 months, mom's giving you more room to fail, and you fail constantly. Your first hunt is a scorpion. It looks slow, it looks easy, and it stings you directly on the paw the second you get close. It doesn't kill you. It doesn't even really hurt for long because your body barely registers most venom as a threat worth panicking over. That's the whole unfair premise of your existence in one sting. Something that would drop a human in agony for hours is, to you, a minor inconvenience you shake off before moving on to the next target. Your second attempt is a lizard sunbathing on a rock. You crouch, you wait, you pounce. It darts, but you get its tail, and after a thrashing match you somehow win. It becomes your first real kill. It's not much. It's enough to make you feel invincible. You are not yet, but you're getting there faster than almost anything else your size has any right to. Beat. At around a year old, mom is simply gone. No goodbye, no transition period. One day she's there, the next day she isn't, and you're standing alone in the middle of the savannah with zero backup plan. This is how it works. No honey badger gets a gradual, supported entry into adulthood. You get cut loose and figure it out. The early solo days are rough. You scavenge small mammals, eggs, insects, and you take a bad hit from a porcupine that leaves you limping for days because it turns out enthusiasm isn't the same as skill. But you adjust. You stop charging at everything and start being selective about what's actually worth the fight. Snakes stop being terrifying and start being food because full-grown honey badgers regularly hunt and eat venomous snakes, including cobras, and mostly walk away from it. One documented case involved a honey badger getting bitten by a puff adder, going into what looked like a venom-induced collapse, and then waking up a few hours later and finishing the snake it had just been bitten by. Most animals that get bitten by a puff adder do not get up afterward. You do. That's not toughness in the traditional sense. That's a nervous system running on hardware other predators simply don't have. Beat. By 2 years old, you've built a reputation, and it's wildly disproportionate to your actual size. Most predators on the savanna outweigh you by a factor of 10. Lions, leopards, hyenas. On paper, you should be near the bottom of every single one of those matchups. In practice, you're something all of them have learned to avoid, not because you can beat them in a straight fight, but because fighting you is never worth what it costs. You don't fight to win. You fight to make the entire experience unbearable for the other animal. And that turns out to be its own kind of victory. Part of that reputation is chemical, not behavioral. Snake venom works by locking onto a specific receptor in your muscles, a kind of molecular switchboard that normally receives signals telling your muscles to move. Most venom hijacks that switchboard and jams it shut, which is why a snake bite victim eventually stops being able to breathe. Your version of the receptor has a handful of tiny structural changes, the equivalent of the venom's key no longer quite fitting your lock. It's not full immunity. A big enough dose from the right species can still hurt you badly. But the margin between this ends me and this is a bad afternoon is dramatically wider for you than for almost anything else your size, and you didn't have to learn that margin exists. You were simply issued it at birth. There's a version of this that plays out constantly. A leopard has a kill up a tree, guarding it the way leopards do, and you show up anyway. Any sensible animal walks away. You don't. The leopard growls a warning. You walk closer. It swipes. You dodge and come back harder, straight at its face. And after a few tense seconds of mutual posturing, it's the leopard that backs off. Not because it lost, but because it did the math and decided this particular meal wasn't worth whatever you were about to do to its face. You take the kill. This happens often enough that it stops being a story and starts being a Tuesday. Beat. Here's another unfair detail nobody mentions enough. Your skin isn't just thick, it's loose. Loose enough that when something does manage to get a grip on you, you can rotate almost completely inside it and bite back at whatever's holding on, from an angle it never expected. Most animals treat "something has its jaws around me" as the beginning of the end. For you, it's just an awkward middle of the fight. You've been recorded shrugging off blows from animals that could, by every reasonable measure, end you in a single clean hit, and walking away with a limp instead of a body count against your name. You're also, according to multiple independent observers, borderline impossible to keep contained. There's a well-documented case of a honey badger at a wildlife rehabilitation center in South Africa named Stoffel, who escaped his enclosure repeatedly. Not through brute force, but by using loose rocks, mud, and even garden tools left nearby to build makeshift ramps up the enclosure wall. Staff kept reinforcing the enclosure. Stoffel kept solving it anyway. Guinness World Records eventually gave honey badgers the title of most fearless animal on the planet. And reading through the list of things that title was based on, attacking animals many times their size, raiding beehives while getting stung repeatedly, surviving snake bites that would kill almost anything else your size. It's less a title and more a formal acknowledgement that the rules other animals live by simply don't apply to you the same way. Beat. You don't discriminate about who you'll fight either. A pack of wild dogs near your dinner, a jackal trying to sneak past unnoticed, a hyena that thinks its size settles the argument before it starts. You treat all of it the same way. For most animals in this ecosystem, survival is built around avoiding conflict wherever possible. For you, survival looks like doubling down until the other animal decides it isn't worth it. Not because you're actually stronger, but because you've apparently never received the memo that you're supposed to be afraid. By 3 years old, you're looking for territory of your own, and that process is exactly as combative as everything else in your life. The first patch of land you try already belongs to an older honey badger who is not interested in sharing, and the fight that follows is fast, brutal, and ends with you retreating, a little wiser and considerably more bruised. You didn't want that land anyway. Eventually, you find a better spot, enough cover, water nearby, decent prey density, currently claimed by a jackal who, unlike the honey badger before, isn't willing to actually fight you over it. One snarl and a half-committed charge later, it's yours. Beat. Life settles into something like a routine. You patrol. You mark territory. You handle intruders quickly and without much drama because most animals learn the lesson after one encounter and don't come back for a second. You've also stopped being picky. Honey badgers eat almost anything that moves and plenty of things that don't. Insects, rodents, birds, eggs, roots, fruit, carrion, venomous snakes, scorpions, and yes, honey and bee larvae whenever you can find them, which is where the name comes from even though honey barely makes up a fraction of your actual diet. Most predators specialize. You didn't bother. Being willing to eat literally anything means you're rarely the animal that starves when conditions get hard, which is one more unfair little edge nobody else on the savannah gets to have for free. By 5 years old, you've accumulated enough scars to tell 100 stories. Not that you'd ever bother. Bragging isn't really in your nature, mostly because you've never had to convince anyone of anything. Your reputation does that work for you now. You're not invincible. Nothing here has been about being unbeatable. You've lost fights. You've limped away from encounters you probably shouldn't have started. But the sheer number of matchups that should have ended badly for you and simply didn't, the venom that should have killed you and only slowed you down, the predators many times your size that backed off rather than commit to actually finishing the fight. The bee stings and scorpion venom and porcupine quills that all amount to inconveniences instead of injuries. That's the part that isn't fair to every other animal sharing this ecosystem with you. They have to be strategic. They have to be cautious. You mostly just have to be annoyed enough to commit. Beat old age slows you down eventually, the way it slows everything down. By 8 or 9, the fights you used to charge into without a second thought start leaving you sore for days afterward, and you start picking your battles instead of accepting all of them. When a younger honey badger wanders into your